Does it matter who's right? I mean, I certainly think so, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. And I've seen a number of theists who really play the, well, it doesn't really make a difference card. And that's seemingly what we're in for today. Should you care? And if you don't, why are you making this video in the first place? That's kind of a good question. I doubt we're going to get a very good answer, but let's see. This time, we visit a small channel called ManWithHands, which most of us do have, men or otherwise, but maybe that's all going to make sense in the end. Probably not, but what else is new, right? The name of the video is Atheism versus Christianity, and why it doesn't matter who's right. Well, I'm sorry, but I happen to disagree. It does matter because what's right affects how you ought to be living your life. Granted, the religious don't tend to care about that, do they? Therefore, let's just dive in and see what's what, because I have no idea how this is going to turn out. Okay, let's stop right here and take a look at this because there are a lot of problems. Well, here's the Bible as I understand it, which means absolutely nothing, because who knows if you have any actual understanding? Nobody really seems to. It all seems to be faith and fifis, and that is just not impressive. However, I'm pretty dumb, and that might be the most cogent thing that he's going to say all video. I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. Not to insult him or anything, because I literally haven't seen the first word that he's going to say, but I think if more people actually acknowledged their own ignorance and cared about the actual truth more than their stupid fifis, they'd be a whole lot better off. Maybe this is just a good sign, I don't know. Let's find out.
Scientifically speaking, God shouldn't exist. After all, science relies on things we can see, hear, touch, or prove through experimentation, and the Christian God flies in the face of all that.
No, that's not exactly how that works. Science evaluates things that can be evaluated. That's it. The only thing that we've ever found any evidence for are material things. This is where I get mad at people who say, well, you have faith in materialism. Like we start off with the preconception that only nature exists and automatically reject anything else. That is simply not true. We accept what we can find evidence for. If the religious could produce evidence for the supernatural, then we would accept the supernatural. The problem is that without evidence, how do you tell the difference between something that exists and something that's just made up? Ask the religious that, then watch their eyes roll back in their heads as they try to rationalize an answer, because there really isn't one. They want some things to be real, whether or not they actually are. I care only about the things that are demonstrably real. I don't care about the crap you just made up in your head. So I don't have faith in materialism. I accept what we actually can show is real. And so far, that's nothing supernatural.
Frankly, it seems like a no-brainer. After all, if there is a God, he should have no trouble proving his existence to us through miracles and the like, right?
I mean, assuming that said God actually has any of those characteristics, I would assume so, but that's another problem. How do you actually get to those characteristics, considering you have no actual demonstrable God to look at and find out what it's like? That's another good question that they have absolutely no answers for. How did you get there if you have no evidence to support it? It's kind of fun to watch them squirm, isn't it?
Sure, we have supposed records of miracles through the Bible, but chances are most of us probably haven't seen anything like that with our own eyes. In a world where humanity has thrived through technology and innovation, faith in an invisible higher power should be extinct.
Should be, but isn't, because humans are often not rational. They are looking for fast, easy answers, and magical men in the sky are among the fastest and easiest answers imaginable. None of that pesky evidence, none of those difficult facts. You don't have to do any experiments. You just have to believe. The problem is, that's just stupid. Anyone can have faith in anything, no matter how absurd it is. The members of the Heaven's Gate cult had faith that an alien spacecraft was coming in the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet to take them all the way to paradise. Was that a reasonable belief? Most people would say no. So what makes that less reasonable than believing in an invisible man in the sky? Nothing. Nothing at all. Faith is not a rational path to truth. It's just delusion, and people really shouldn't be deluded. That so many are, that says a lot of bad things about their mental faculties. You really ought to knock that off.
Why am I, a self-proclaimed Christian, bothering to make some video that'll probably end up getting less than 20 views in the hopes of obeying a God I've never physically seen, heard, touched, or scientifically proven?
Good question. Sadly, I really don't think you're going to have a good answer. This is why we ask them questions and why they just stand there going, duh, because the rational elevator doesn't tend to reach the top floor. They just really want to believe. It's based on feelings, not facts, and that's a problem, right? Well, not according to them, because they aren't thinking about any of these things critically. They just really like the idea, but liking the idea, just like the Heaven's Gate cult members, that doesn't make a difference, does it? You people need to be smarter. Try.
Are all Christians idiots who just want to feel special by convincing themselves they're part of some grand eternal plan? Well, maybe.
Hey, you said it, not me. Now, I do think that for a lot of them, that is indeed the case. Most people out there really are dumb. And that's not really intended as an insult, it's just the truth. They believe what makes them happy and reject the things that make them sad, and they don't really understand how to tell the difference between the two, nor do they actually care. It's why they vote the way they do. They can't actually understand the issues, they just go with whoever says the most comforting things and makes the most impressive lies. That is not how you ought to be living your life. Sadly, most people do.
But let's see where this goes. First, let's get something straight. Because of the nature of God in this world, we cannot physically prove God exists or doesn't exist, and anyone who claims they can prove one side or the other based on scientific evidence is inherently biased one way or the other.
And how do you know that exactly? Because you have no actual way to tell what any potential gods might actually be like. Just because you really believe it, that doesn't make it true. Just saying, well, there are invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies, and you can't prove they don't exist. Okay, fine, but you've never given me any reason to take the idea seriously in the first place, so why should I believe you? And that's an honest question to which you will never, ever get an honest answer from the religious. Now, there are exceptions. I saw a video recently where Jimmy Snow and Matt Dillahunty were talking to a Catholic priest, and I have never seen anyone get the wind taken out of their sails as fast as I did there. He had no idea what the hell to say, and every profession of faith just got roasted by the fact that anybody can have faith in anything, true or not. He just couldn't make it across the line into, well, I guess I have no good reason to believe that any of this is true. Because he just wanted it to be true. Lots of theists get there, but they just get frustrated or angry because they are so conditioned to believe that these things are true that they can't even entertain the possibility that it's not. Just because you like it, that doesn't make it so. You have to have better reasons than that, and sadly for the religious, they never ever do.
Nobody else was there when God created the universe, and anyone who was alive in the time of Jesus or the prophets has been dead hundreds of years at least by now.
If any of that ever happened to begin with. Too bad the religious have no evidence for any of it, right? This isn't the age when non-believers could be bullied, or let's be honest, outright murdered, just to shut them up. That's why these people stop at faith instead of doing what I did, what eventually led to my deconversion, because I cared about what was actually true in the real world. Now, I was absolutely convinced that I would confirm every bit of my faith, but the more that I looked, the more that I found that it was all just bogus. Believing it doesn't make it true, which is why the Bible warns not to ask any impertinent questions, because that just leads to non-belief. It leads to reality, and religion has no use for that.
Studying ancient scripts and archaeological sites is both fascinating and worthwhile, but at the end of the day, every conclusion from them is a best guess simply because we weren't there.
That's not necessarily the case. If you have evidence, then you can verify that at least some of the stories actually happened. We go right back to the Trojan War example, where nobody in their right mind believed it happened because we had no evidence. Then we found the archaeological evidence that it did. That's when we accepted it as it had been shown to be real. Now, all of the gods and goddesses talked about in the Homeric epics, we don't accept those because those things have no evidence that they're true. And the same goes for the Bible. We can prove that some of the places and perhaps some of the people in the Bible were real. I'm with you that far. It's all of the supernatural nonsense that has nothing at all to support it that loses me, and it ought to lose you too. And it's kind of sad that it doesn't.
As far as places where science and the Bible seemingly contradict, neither science nor our interpretation of the Bible is perfect.
And only one side is claiming that their views are. Granted, when it comes to Christianity, you still have 45,000 or whatever distinct sects worldwide, each of them convinced that their reading is right and pretty much everyone else's is wrong. But how do you actually find out which, if any of them, are factually correct? Because the second you ask that question to any of them, they'll either get really quiet and move straight to faith, or they'll get really mad and move straight to faith. And as we all know, that doesn't actually mean anything. It's why the questions that we ask are so important. How do you know that? And how do you demonstrate that you actually do? What do we get from the religious? Tears, threats, or the sound of running feet. That's kind of sad, isn't it?
Even if God performed an incredible miracle in front of the entire world, some people would see it as proof of God, just as others would see it as evidence of something else.
Which is why miracles don't mean anything. Even if we saw something amazing, that doesn't mean God done it. I mean, first off, which God are you talking about? Because there are thousands that man has, currently or in the past, bowed down to, and that's if you don't take the claims among some Hindus of millions of gods seriously. So which of them actually done it, assuming it wasn't a god that no one's ever heard of before? That's why having a thing happen doesn't prove the existence of any god. It's why most of the religious arguments for God fail, not only because they're all fallacious, but because they don't actually point to a single demonstrable God being real. You have to get there first, and none of them are even trying.
In other words, we can trade facts and theories for both sides all we want, but at the end of the day, a Christian will see every piece of evidence as pointing towards the existence of a God, while an atheist will see the same pieces of evidence as proof there isn't one.
Not true, because atheists, by and large, aren't claiming that there aren't any gods. Most atheists, because there are a few, but we'll stick with the majority for the moment, they're not saying gods aren't real. They're saying, we have no evidence to believe it. We're saying that you haven't demonstrated it to our satisfaction. You haven't presented sufficient evidence to prove that your claims are true. Therefore, we don't believe you. And I guess it's no surprise that this guy doesn't know what atheism is. Most theists don't. Again, most just don't care. We're just the imaginary boogeymen that they made up in their heads to get them to their silly persecution fantasies. But this isn't a balanced debate between two sides making positive claims. It's one side making wild-eyed assertions, and the other side who are just evaluating those claims and finding them ridiculously lacking. This assumes that the religious had any evidence whatsoever, which I think we all know by now they simply do not. They just have faith, fifis, and wishful thinking, nothing even remotely close to actual, demonstrable, verifiable evidence, especially when it comes to proving their specific gods. They just really want it to be true.
Okay, but if we can't base our conclusion on scientific facts, what do we base it on then?
Well, you don't. If you don't have evidence, then you shouldn't believe. And that's the part that scares the bejesus out of these people because they just really want to. It gives them emotional comfort to think that there's some invisible father figure in the sky watching over them, ready to whisk them away from harm and into an eternal paradise after they die. They don't want to give that up, no matter how silly the belief actually is. If you do not have the actual evidence at hand, then you should not believe anything. Say, I don't know. Keep looking. Your faith and your fifis mean absolutely nothing, and the whole thing just makes you look stupid.
Well, I don't think it really matters. Wait, before you click off the video and call me a nutjob, hear me out, alright? Assuming we define God as omnipotent, there are really 4 possibilities here.
But you can't just define things willy-nilly however you like. That's a problem. I can't just take my dog and define that she can fly, because she can't. I can't just look at my car and say, well, it can go 1,000,000 miles an hour, because it can't. I am rationally constrained by what is demonstrable in the real world, and sadly for the religious, their gods are not demonstrably real at all. You can't just say, well, it's like this, if you can't show that it's actually like that. Not if you want to be taken seriously. This is where the religious get things completely wrong and why they are increasingly becoming a complete laughingstock. You can't just invent your God out of whole cloth as most have done. You have to actually show how you got there. You have to be able to show your work. You can't say, well, it says so in my book. Okay, then how did the people who wrote the book know that? Demonstrate that they were correct. Because it all comes around to faith, and as we've already established, faith means nothing. And that's why religion is such a pathetic joke.
1. God doesn't exist.
Which, based on all the evidence that we actually have, seems most likely. There is no good reason, at least not that I have ever seen, since I can only speak for myself, to think that any gods of any kind are real. Your feelings don't mean anything. Your comfort doesn't mean anything. God is like leprechauns and unicorns, made up stories that no one has ever proven are reasonable at all. Therefore, that's what I'm sticking with until someone proves otherwise. Go right ahead.
2. God does exist and wants to be in a relationship with you.
Those two things are not even remotely related. How does God, supposedly being omnipotent, say anything about what this magical man in the sky might want? This is just forcing your unproven theology into the mix, and that's just stupid. Okay, God exists. Let's just say that. Or a God of some kind exists, which Christians in this case don't want to consider because they are irrationally wedded to only their particular imaginary friend, but let's just say something is there. A God is a remote possibility since we can't completely rule it out. But again, zero evidence means we have no reason to believe it at all and less reason to lean into Christianity. So how do we tell which God this might actually be? Who the hell knows? Because there is no evidence that any of them are real. It could be something that we can't even imagine. It could be something completely Cthulhian. We don't know. So why in the world should we take any of these things seriously until we have good reason to accept them? And the answer is we shouldn't. But as you know, the religious just don't care. These are people who just aren't thinking critically, or let's be honest, much at all.
3. God does exist and does not want to be in a relationship with you.
Again, irrelevant. Let's establish the existence of a God first. Any God. I don't really care what that God wants until that God has been proven to be real. Because you telling me what you think that God wants means nothing until you can demonstrate you've got some rational basis in order to understand it yourself. I don't care what claims people make about Voldemort if Voldemort isn't real. Now, this started looking an awful lot like Pascal's wager, which, as we all know, is just dumb. Hopefully he's not going to go down that path, but I kind of have a sinking suspicion that he will. Let's see.
And there is a fourth one, but it says God exists and offers you the choice of being in a relationship with him. It's the most complicated one, so we'll save it for last.
Well, we always have a choice. That's something that the religious don't really like, which is why they tend to use so many impotent threats. They want you to do what they want you to do, and if you don't, they'll use a stick to scare you back to their way of thinking. Again, none of this really matters, and it's still feeling very Pascal's wagery, but I'm holding out hope for something worthwhile in the end. Keep your fingers crossed, even though it's not going to do any good.
Let's run through each of these and see where they lead us first. 1. God doesn't exist. If God doesn't exist, it really doesn't matter if you believe in God or not.
But it does. This is one of the places, among many, that Pascal's wager fails. Because if you believe in a God your entire life and do all of the things that your religion demands that you do, including giving up all the things that you might do otherwise and enjoy otherwise because of your religious beliefs, then when you die and there is no God, you've wasted the only life that you actually get, banking on an afterlife that isn't really there. I mean, sure, you can do whatever the hell you want to do, but your God belief can ruin your actual life. And if there is no God, you've just wasted your time here. So, you're wrong.
Since both atheists and Christians are going to the same place, we should all just live our lives as we want without caring at all about what happens to anyone else. Christians may be wrong, but at the end of the day, this just means Christians are like flat earthers. Hopelessly ignorant, but pretty much harmless to everyone but themselves.
Hell no! Were the 9/11 suicide hijackers harmless? Are the idiot Christians who shoot abortion doctors harmless? Are the megachurch pastors who demand money from people who have none to spare so that they're eating cat food while the pastors are just buying another jet, are those people harmless? Absolutely not. Even your average run-of-the-mill Christian who actually believes this stuff and follows the words from the pulpit, are they harmless? Not if they're trying to convert others to their insane way of thinking. Not if they're allowing their beliefs to color the way that they treat others, how they raise their children, how they vote, and how they treat society. Your beliefs inherently affect your actions. It is not harmless to pretend that God is going to come and take you home so you don't have to concern yourself with the environment or the hungry or anything else because God will provide. That is not harmless. It is harmful, and it comes straight out of religion. I'm sure the Muslims who throw gay people off of roofs think they're doing the right thing, or the Christians who voted against gay marriage. But they're not. They're wrong. They are doing immeasurable harm to actual people. And it's time they got that through their stupid heads.
2. God does exist and wants to be in a relationship with you. If God exists and wants to be in a relationship with you, then you're going to end up in a relationship with him. The same goes for if God exists and does not want to be in a relationship with you. If either one of these are true, then what you believe right now matters very little in an eternal sense.
So, you're a slave, is that what you're saying? Because I don't care if the Christian God exists and wants to be in a relationship with me. I want nothing at all to do with that asshole. God hasn't earned it. I've read about his exploits in the Bible. God is a dick. Are you telling me that I, who have now decided that I want nothing at all to do with your prick deity, that it doesn't matter what I think? Because the Bible begs to differ. Now, if you're a Calvinist and nothing anyone does matters, God's going to do whatever the hell he wants to do and you're either saved or damned no matter what you think, then fine, I guess. So why are you making this video? Why bother? Because you're not going to change anyone's mind, and it wouldn't matter if you did. You're predestined to go wherever God wants to send you, which, again, God is a dick, and nobody should ever bow down to this moral monster. Of course, if I'm damned, then anything I do in life is irrelevant. Same if I'm saved. So who gives a damn? Why do you have a channel making videos for people to watch? It's like solipsists trying to convince others, who they are certain aren't real, to embrace their position. Why are you wasting your damn time? Why are you wasting ours? Because I'm really starting to wonder why I'm bothering.
It's that simple. The only time anything changes is if 4. God does exist and wants to offer you the choice of whether or not you want to be in a relationship with him.
But he doesn't, at least not in Christianity. Holding an axe over your head and saying, well, you have a choice, is nonsense. If you say no, you go to hell. That's not a choice. This is why these things are just so ludicrous, because there are no choices in Christianity at all. I mean, sure, you can cherry pick the Bible and ignore all the parts you don't like. Most Christians do, but that doesn't make those passages go away. This gets you right back to those 45,000 whatever distinct sects, all of them screaming, but we're right. Prove it. I mean, really, prove any of this. This is just nonsense, and even though he hasn't quite delved into Pascal's wager yet, I mean, not really, that could still be coming. What you want to be true doesn't matter. Only what you can prove does. Do something. Try.
This is the stance I think most Christians still take, and if you can't tell already, I kind of think it's baloney.
Yeah, we're back to Calvinism, which I think is baloney too. That's where I'm going to stop for the day before he gets to trying to justify whatever he's going to try to justify. I don't know. I can guess, but I don't know for sure. Next time, we're going to pick it up right here and see if it drifts into Calvinism or not, which, if it does, I guess we really haven't handled that much, so that could be interesting. Anyway, what do you think so far? Do you think it doesn't matter who's right, or do you think this guy is horribly off the mark, as I do, and off into La La Land? Let me know down in the comments what you think. Because I think it's interesting sometimes to take a look at different takes on religion that go off the beaten path, even though I think we all know that these people are just never going to be able to justify any of it, nor are they really going to try. It'll be, but here's what I believe, as if that matters, and we'll all be rolling our eyes because your faith doesn't mean a thing. That's really what stops most religious conversations once you hit that point where your adversary can't get out of their own head, and really, what more can you say? You're wrong? But I'm not. Well, how do you know? Because I say so. I mean, what's the point of that? It's why I am so critical of the religious mindset, because they are trapped in that 3-pound meat sack like the rest of us, but they're terrified to look outside to see what's actually going on. They are terrified to care if what they believe, what they like, what makes them feel good is actually so. Because, like our video maker today, they really don't care, do they? It's a pathetic way to live your life. But there's a lot of pathetic people out there, aren't there? Sad, isn't it?